Houston chapter's National Philanthropy Day. We're planning to be in person with all of your favorite awards next year in 2021. So looking forward to seeing you all then. I'm Rebecca Lamb, president of the Greater Houston chapter of AFP. I want to ask that you all please join me in thanking our sponsors, Houston Business Journal, Phillips 66, and UT Health. We're so appreciative of their support, especially this year. At the conclusion of the presentation, our sponsor, Kevin Foyle, Vice President for Development and Public Affairs for UT Health and incoming chair of AFP's Global Board, will moderate your questions. So please be sure to put your questions and comments in the chat as we go along. It's my pleasure to introduce our speakers, Maureen Hackett, Kelly Hackett, and Steve Maislin. And Maureen has worked in the philanthropy sector in various positions for over 40 years. She served as chairman of the board of several nonprofit organizations, an advisor to many others, and is an avid supporter of the community at large. Her expertise in government issues, strategic planning, advancement, community outreach, and board development has benefited myriad communities to date, and it continues to influence Maureen's philanthropic efforts both locally and across the nation. In May of 2018, Indiana University awarded her an honorary doctorate in humane letters in recognition of her outstanding achievements and limitless promotion of human welfare, which she consistently inspires in others. Maureen and her husband, Jim, have 4 adult children and 3 grandchildren who, under Maureen's leadership, together constitute a philanthropic team committed to their combined passions. Their priority as donors and community activists is to act as agents of change in the realm of behavioral and mental health, with a focus on awareness and education, research and treatment, and the eradication of the stigma associated with mental illness. In pursuit of that priority, they recently established the Hackett Center for Mental Health, the primary policy development and operating presence of the Meadows Mental Health Policy Institute for Texas in the Houston region. The Hackett Center is focused on putting policy into practice in partnership with the region's leading health systems so that all of Texas can obtain effective and efficient behavioral health care when and where they need it. In addition to mental health awareness and advocacy, the Hackett family is dedicated to serving the interests that make up the heart of every strong community: family, faith, health, and education. Now, Kelly Hackett is both a thought leader in family enterprise management for Tectonic Partners. She partners closely with clients on governance, succession planning, wealth education, financial management, and charitable strategies. For Kelly, ensuring families achieve their multi-generational investment, lifestyle, and philanthropic goals is not just a career, it's a calling. A native Houstonian, Kelly has achieved a world-class education and broad professional experiences in finance and law. After graduating from Georgetown University with degrees in international business and finance, Kelly was an investment analyst at John Hancock Financial Services in Boston. She later earned her law degree from the University of Texas School of Law, is also a chartered advisor in philanthropy, and holds certificates in finance and accounting from Rice University and in business and comparative strategic management from the University of Oxford. Kelly's professional accomplishments are matched by her relentless dedication to give back to others. She's been involved in volunteer activities for over 2 decades, has served on the boards of health, education, and child welfare organizations, including her current service at St. Agnes Academy, the Alliance for Catholic Education at the University of Notre Dame, and the Greater Houston Community Foundation, where she's a council member and an alumna of the inaugural class of the Next Gen Donor Institute. Beyond her board duties, Kelly is also a hands-on volunteer for treasured causes, including providing at-home ministry and Eucharistic services to the residents of a local assisted living facility each Sunday since 2010. Kelly honed her experience in family office and family foundation management as vice president of her family's private foundation and as a managing director in Salient's family office group. In early 2017, Kelly left Salient to found the Tectonic Advisors Family Office Division. Tectonic leverages Kelly's rare combination of personal and professional experiences, offering tailored family enterprise and wealth management services to ensure that each client family can reach its own financial milestones, free up time for life's most fulfilling activities, and build a philanthropic legacy for future generations. And this morning's discussion is going to be led by Steve Maislin, President and CEO of the Greater Houston Community Foundation. Steve is responsible for leading efforts to evolve the organization's continuing focus on serving donors and connecting them to Houston's philanthropic community. Steve, along with the foundation's dynamic team, is dedicated to creating a lasting impact with individuals, families, businesses, and foundations. He also continues to work with professional advisors to develop and administer charitable plans that meet their clients' financial and giving goals. With a bachelor's degree in economics from the Wharton School and a JD from the University of Texas School of Law, Steve is a frequent speaker in charitable planning, donor-advised funds, and the power of the Community Foundation platform to grow philanthropic impact. Steve came to the Greater Houston Community Foundation in 2001 after an 18-year career as an estate planning advisor to high net worth families. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Steve. Thank you all for being here.
Sorry, thank you very much. I appreciate it. I am really delighted to be with everyone today and to be able to facilitate a conversation as we learn from Maureen and Kelly. At the Greater Houston Community Foundation, we are big believers in strategic philanthropy, in giving in a thoughtful way to maximize impact using head and heart. And the Hackett family are really the ultimate exemplars of strategic philanthropy, of the idea that one gives not just treasure, not just the financial support, but also time, talent, and ties. And any of you who have worked with them know that when the Hacketts get behind your mission, they are all in. I had real world experience with that when Maureen was our chair and led a strategic transformation that, to be honest, put community into the Greater Houston Community Foundation and really changed our trajectory on a permanent basis. So I'm a real believer in the way that they approach philanthropy, and I've seen the impact that they've had on our community and beyond. So it really is a pleasure to be with you today. With that, let me kick it off by posing a first question to Maureen, and Kelly obviously weigh in if you'd like afterwards. Maureen, can you describe a most meaningful gift that really brought your family together around your tradition of philanthropy?
Absolutely. The most recent gift, the biggest gift we've ever given, which Kelly, running my office, refers to as legacy. I just call it huge. Is to endow the Hackett Center for Mental Health under the umbrella of the Meadows Mental Health Policy Institute. So I can tell you, for 40 years of being an advocate, chairing events, supporting programs, supporting services, I turned to my husband and said, I'm not making a difference here. We're just not moving the needle. What do you think the next step is? And of course, we thought, well, if we make it law, maybe we can write $500 tickets to people that don't accept anyone for access of care to mental health services. And we knew we had to be involved in policy. It was just about that time that I was invited to join the Meadows Mental Health Policy Institute board, where I learned a whole lot. First of all, about collaboration, people from around the state of Texas, thought leaders, talking about what it was like in their community for access to care, research, education, taking care of everyone, and speaking for those that can't speak for themselves. I was really impressed with the staff, management, and leadership, because they were kind enough to make me feel really good and ask me what my thoughts were on this. So in that sense, I never felt that I was coming to this board, which so many times you do, to just give money. I was coming to give passion. I was coming to give thoughts. I was coming to give some strategic help. I was coming to push back on some ideas. I was coming to champion some ideas that I thought were right. So lo and behold, I joined the board, and not just a short time, I would say 18 months later, Hurricane Harvey hit, and we all know the devastation that Hurricane Harvey caused here and the tragedy. And I worried tremendously when I heard the number of children who were affected by this, that I thought, how are they going to get out of this? The trauma, the PTSD, they had lost pets. Some had lost parents, grandparents, homes for sure, schools. And that was a perfect time to think about, what can I possibly do? What can this family possibly do to help these kids out and their families, which indeed would help the communities as well. So after many, many months of a lot of strategy and due diligence, and you can certainly tell with Kelly's background that it was a thorough investigation of whether or not we could invest in this. But also, it was a thorough investigation, coordinated effort on the part of MMHPI. They really cared, and they really wanted us to achieve our goal and to create a legacy, which has always been a dream of mine. So we talked as a family. First of all, we did our research on them. And it was new. It was a young puppy. It was only 2 years old. So we did our research on them. We looked at the Meadows Foundation, of course, but then I looked at the board members and the cities that were represented. No one was left out. These weren't just major metropolitan areas. This was the Rio Grande. This was Beaumont. This was Richmond. This was Port Aransas. So we did our research in that sense, and they did their research as to where the children's piece, that niche of mine, would fit in. Well, what better than Houston, Texas? And at that point in time, we thought about it months and months. We worked with a team, as you know, Steve. We worked with the state attorneys. We worked with family members. We worked with advancement development management people. Everybody that we worked with, several of who were trained by AFP or the Lilly School of Philanthropy, to help us make this a smooth and impactful and meaningful gift. So that was made in 2017, and it's been just a dream. It's captured my dream, I should tell you that. And I've been able to involve my children and my grandchildren in this. So we're having some fun. And of course, with the help of AFP and the help of GHCF, we've been able to fly pretty much at a great pace. So I hope that answers your question.
Absolutely. And I think that many people on the call can appreciate a gift that's both legacy and huge. That's a good thing. And I was really interested. Your comment that the staff really cared is something that I think many of us can relate to, how important that is, the importance of team. And that something you said right at the end, the fun, that you're having fun doing it, that's critically important, making a difference and having fun at the same time.
Absolutely.
So thank you for that. Kelly, let me send the next question your direction, if I could, which is, how does your generation influence your giving? At the Community Foundation, we see more and more emphasis on data, a technology component, knowledge, what have you. Are you finding those kind of elements, and what's your approach?
Yeah, I think so, for sure. I mean, there are two different ways that I can respond to this. One, I'm everyone's favorite generation, which means I'm a millennial. And a lot of reporting has been done on that and what that means. And you've alluded to some of it, which is very true. I think my mom also alluded to it in her last answer, which is, yeah, I have a lot of boxes that have to be ticked for things to make sense. It's not just that it's going to make my parents feel good and feel like they're going to, create some sort of impact that they want, but I have to have all of the markers ticked to show me that impact is in fact going to happen and in a certain time frame. But I think, putting aside whether I'm a true millennial or not, I think more important is that I'm a second generation philanthropist. And I think that colors my perspective in the sense that, it's not my money to be giving out, but my job is for sure to concern myself with whether my parents' legacy is actually going to be impacted in a beneficial way. So what does that mean? I mean, as my mom has said, I'm a tough cookie. So she has often referred to me as her Attila.
Yeah.
And that really just means that I have a lot of expectations when it comes to grantees and nonprofit partners. My parents don't give on a whim, like she said. They do a ton of research. They're very intentional about their gifts. So for me, stewardship is critical. I want to know what's going on with our grantees all the time. I don't want to just hear from people when there's a campaign. I want them to treat my parents as true investment partners because this is such a significant part of my parents' lives. I want nonprofits to recognize that they have a role in that. And I want them to treat my parents as more than just an ask. I want them to treat them as true partners and keep us informed that way. Now, I realize that, requiring all of this updating and information can be expensive and time consuming. And I don't mean that I need written reports on a quarterly basis. Phone calls, emails, even just social media posts that let us know what's going on and what they're doing with past gifts or give us an idea of what they could do with a new gift we might make. That's what I'm really looking for. So I'm an Attila in the stewardship world. And if that is something that millennials also do, then yay us.
Well, and Steve, I might just add that I think you know this from a firsthand experience that I give 150% to every organization because I enjoy it. I take this on, it's part of me. But I also, you expect a lot from me, so I expect a lot from you, from the staff, from the management, from everybody, all the way down, because we can't accomplish what the dream is. We can't accomplish the mission of the Greater Houston Community Foundation, the Hackett Center, MD Anderson, Lilly. We can't accomplish any of that unless we work as a team and understand the first thing we need to collaborate on is thinking. Thinking.
Yeah.
So
the thought partnership aspect is absolutely critical. And I will say from the Community Foundation perspective, we see more and more donors who want what Kelly was describing. And I'm constantly amazed that some nonprofits are just wonderfully good at that and others are not. And it's not necessarily the size of the organization. So that commitment to regular communication, and as you say, it can be informal, but keeping someone in the loop. And I like the way you described it, like an investor. No money management firm would take your money and never come back and give you feedback. That's sort of what you're looking for from what I.
That's exactly right. Yeah,
right.
That's exactly right.
Interesting. Okay, Maureen, next question for you that I think is timely and probably on everybody's mind. Has the pandemic changed any of your views with regard to philanthropy, your actions, areas of focus? Will the pandemic fundamentally change the way that you give?
Well, very interesting question. I mean, based on the area that I'm most passionate about, I think mental health has been a pandemic for a very long time. And I think right now with the pandemic, with the social injustice and racism in this country, we are in a pandemonium. So will our gifts change? Likely, I will continue to take it up a notch in terms of social justice and how the pandemic, COVID, affects families, children, schools, et cetera, in a mental health way. The other piece that I recommend you guys think about, everyone in AFP and beyond, is this pandemic could very well affect you, your business, and your employees. So I suggest take a step back, take a deep breath, and check in on one another and practice the act of kindness and do that on a regular basis. I think you might see perhaps a change in stewardship. You might see that when you give an opportunity for someone to listen to you say thank you, they understand just how wonderful that is. So that's a little bit of advice. Now, the other piece, will I take a right turn? Likely I will, because I'm very passionate about the research, and goodness knows we need a vaccine. And I hear it constantly. We all hear it. We listen to Dr. Hotez. I would love to invest in faster to the market with keeping a great eye on quality and success. Yes, that piece will definitely change my thinking. So I would go into current pandemonia in the country. And so those are the areas that, and so I'm thinking not just COVID, I'm thinking social injustice. I'm thinking lack of mental health care. I'm thinking kids without homes. I'm thinking old elderly people without anyone to talk to. I'm thinking about churches and synagogues and the likes that are falling apart. So while I'll continue on my social justice path, which includes mental health, I will also take a look at social justice, which is the vaccine. We all deserve it, everybody, no matter who you are or what you do. And I think that in the media today, it makes it very clear that there's a lot of angst, there's a lot of anger, there's a lot of misunderstanding. So that will just have me work a little bit harder for people to understand that if we can take care of one another, our heart first, our head first, the heart and the rest of the body will come along. Mm-hmm. So you agree?
Yeah, I mean, I think for sure there's been opportunity for us to change our typical timeline. You know, like we said, we do a ton of diligence, which we still do, but we made sure to do it in a manner that wasn't going to slow down our ability to make an impact where it needed to be made quickly. So, you know, to the extent that we had been focusing on long-term programs or endowments in the mental health field, we shifted immediately to what can we do to immediately impact efforts to come up with a vaccine. Will it ever change the fact that I'm an Attila and that I want the same sorts of things after gifts have been made? No, unfortunately, everyone's stuck with that. But timeline shift for sure.
Well, and Steve, to your point, to your question, I think that if we indeed can find a partner or a group getting after this vaccine research that need funding and they're not in Houston, Texas, yes, we will do some due diligence and see if that makes sense in terms of a partnership. Mm-hmm. I mean, our work is, as you know, philanthropy meaning humankind. Our work is good things for all humans. And that means I don't care if they're in Texas or Hawaii or Bozeman, you know, mm-hmm. we need to do this together. So yeah, it very well could. I'm open to that. Yeah.
Great. I'm kind of fascinated to see what role there will be for philanthropy in terms of addressing future pandemics. And Dr. Hotez has talked about that, building out the technology so vaccines can be developed much more quickly and distributed internationally. So I think that's going to be interesting. It's also fascinating as you talk that mental health touches everything, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, it's
absolutely everything. Yeah.
Really remarkable. And I will just say that to the extent the Community Foundation is an example, this idea of kindness and check-ins, people are really stressed right now, whether they have, you know, kids at home who are trying to learn or they're taking care of a parent or whatever the reason. And so understanding that we still want to be productive, but that, you know, we're also here to be supportive. And I've seen that a lot, by the way, in the decision to keep our office closed for a period of time for everybody's safety. And the trade-off for that is that you get to have lots of Zoom calls, but everybody's comfortable with that. So, so Maureen, a question that I know you have really robust expertise on, in addition to all these others. What can professional fundraisers do better when working with donors? And specifically, what do fundraisers in Houston do really well? And do you see areas for improvement there?
Great question. Yes, I do have an opinion.
wait, she always has an opinion. I get that mixed up.
Okay, so my suggestion to fundraisers in Houston is don't operate in silos. I don't care if you're focused on arts and humanities, education, healthcare, religion, you know, reach out to one another and help each other get some things done. I remember it must have been 15, 20 years ago, I used to have a group to come once a month to my house, and they were all in development, all different organizations, all organizations that I belong to. And it was actually a group called Wine with Winers, because we all had something to whine about. So it was like, you got to that donor, could you tell me your secret? And it was like, oh, that's the Holy Grail. Should I give that secret away? No, we all need to work together. So I would talk about inclusive, be inclusive. Philanthropy is a community here in Houston, Texas. It's everywhere. If you look at it as a community, lean on one another, find out what works, what doesn't work, find out, you know, about a donor that you're going to look for, find out about what's up and really what's the science behind some of the gifts that you're trying to get to. So yes, there's a great article recently written by several of the faculty, including Dean Pasick at Indiana University. It's called Inclusive Philanthropy. It was featured in the Stanford piece, but if you go online to IUPUI, I would look up the article by Amir Pasek and his crew on inclusive philanthropy. And he had researchers, he had economists, he had everyone weighing in on the success should you take that approach. Also, I think philanthropy, you have to engage a cross section of your community to be on your board and to help you with these gifts. I'm thinking she may not have $15 million and I need to get to
True.
she knows somebody, and I need to get to 20 million. But you know what she has? She has thoughts, she has heart, she has passion, compassion, and she'll come to the table and push back, but she'll also say, have you thought about this? So what I think you should do when looking at your organizations, and this is for people adding folks to the board, I look at board members, and I've said this to Steve a number of times, I look at board members as thought partners. I don't look at board members first when people say, oh, can you help me populate my board? And they say, you know, well, we're going to get King Tut because he's got a lot of money. Well, maybe King Tut doesn't have any thoughts. Maybe King Tut doesn't have any time to come. That sounds terrible, but that's the example. That's one example. You could have someone, and I have several in my own family, is somebody in their 30s who is so much more in tune with how to go accomplish the recognition of not just money, but the concept that we're trying to prove. So be open to all and everyone. And in a community, if you're going to serve the population, your mission's going to be serving your population, like the Hackett Center, you better have the community represented at the table.
Yeah.
People who can't afford access to care, they should be at the table. People who can pay for that person should be at the table. If they're compassionate and passionate and they have the human capital to think through the problems. So that would be another one. I did write a few things down, you know me. Don't forget to listen to some of the voices outside your organization. You know, what are they saying about the Community Foundation? Who's saying it? What are they saying? And is it valuable? Is it something that we should take a look at? Listen to your donors, always, constantly. I'm not saying bug them, but soft touches, at least quarterly. How you doing? Students, volunteers, alums, and again, all socioeconomic backgrounds, all ethnicities. If we don't come together as the big human family for humankind, there's so many things we're not going to be able to accomplish. You're seeing museums fall apart, and you're seeing misinformation as to why they're falling apart. People are calling museums places for rich dollars and for the rich people to look at stuff from way, way back. No. Who's saying that and why are you saying that? You know, children need to learn from whence they came. And so I think getting people involved who can't always afford to do something is really important. We need to be inclusive as we talk about inclusivity and equity and diversity. The big word for me is inclusivity. Everybody should be included. Everybody should have equity in it. And diversity can be in thought. Diversity can be in socioeconomic background. Diversity can be in gender. So we all know that. You know who the boss is, Steve, most of the time. Just saying. So does that help?
Absolutely. And I think this whole concept of inclusivity and getting a diversity, cut in many different ways is even more important in our community because it's such a diverse community. And I know at the Community Foundation, we know that we have a lot of learning to do to understand the various components of the community. And it's diverse in a lot of different ways. And so we need voices in the boardroom and among our donors. And I think that's true for most nonprofits. I will also say that I know we could do a better job of creating more regular feedback loops with our donors. And I think that's true for most nonprofits. When I hear what really successful for-profit companies are doing, they have more resources, but there are inexpensive ways to make sure you're reaching out, kind of like what Kelly was talking about before, and having conversations. It doesn't have to be a big fancy printed 20-page document. So I think those are critically important aspects to get us to fulfill our mission.
Can I tell you, I think another concept that I've been trying to encourage some to do this and some organizations is if you find someone who has an opinion and has the information about an organization, or say, let's say for example, the community foundation, you don't require them to have money to get in the club. I made that point before in terms of being thought partners. So you could have committee members who aren't on the board. I encourage that. If you have a group, if you have a development committee, standing committee to the board, a working development committee, it pays to listen to people who perhaps can't afford to give you the time, but they can give you all the talent that you need, the human capital and the energy, and they can tell you exactly why they can't participate financially at a higher level. I'm the guy, you know, with the thermometer at the top of Main Street. I don't care if you give me 25 cents, just be in. And shame on us if we don't include them.
Mhm.
So I encourage committees that don't have to be on the board.
Terrific. That's great. Kelly, next one for you. What have you learned from your philanthropic peers? And where do you go to get research and information? You talked about wanting feedback from the nonprofits, but as you're beginning to address an issue or a cause, how do you do your research and really drill down on that? And what role, if any, do your peers play in that process?
You know, we've always looked to trusted partners that are in the business of philanthropy when it comes to research and information on giving and on general population statistics. So that includes Lilly Family School of Philanthropy, Center for High Impact Philanthropy, Philanthropy Roundtable. You would know how much we rely on GHCF for those sorts of things. You know, having gone through the Next Gen Donor Institute, I learned quite a bit. That was years ago, but I'm still very much in touch with the Center for Family Philanthropy that you have. I learned a ton from your partnership with 2164. And we really do rely heavily on all of those institutions to keep us kind of updated. It's highly important to us. You know, the other thing is that we're a really young family foundation or donor advised fund or whatever. As a group, our family's young. My parents are the first generation. So we could learn from them through a fire hose, which we do many times. But it's also nice to be able to share that load with really trusted partners like GHCF, to be able to rely on them to carry a little bit of that load. But they also, you guys present an unbiased perspective. You come to the table as conveners and you have these great thoughts and questions for us that allow us to speak without having the same sort of concern we might if we were just sitting at the dinner table as a family. So it's great that you guys have financial backgrounds, estate backgrounds. You consider all of the perspectives that perhaps we would overlook while trying to steal the last, roll of bread at the dinner table. So for sure, it's amazing to be able to rely on GHCF and others for information about multi-generational giving, how to establish and implement a plan. As far as my peers go, I've learned a lot from them through those sorts of organizations and programs. I think mental health over the years hasn't seen the same sort of collaboration in terms of funders that perhaps other areas of focus have been afforded. I do see that changing with different task forces that are being put together, giving circles, as well as just each of us trying to nominate one another to boards of organizations. But I guess that being said, while I do have a handful of people that I can rely on as peers, the people I rely on most are my parents. I mean, this trailblazing rock star sitting next to me is probably the best peer I could ever ask for. So I've learned a ton through her, and I would say that I'm really just a conduit to get that information to my peers more than anything else. But collaboration is, and my mom's touched on this multiple times, so important, so important. We don't want to be one of 150 different boats hoping to sail towards the solution. We want to be productive. We want to be responsible. We want to be efficient. So our goal is to get on board with others who have the same ultimate goal or, area of interest, and figure out the best way that we can make an impact, because that's what we all want. So to me, I know that was a part of why my parents established the Hackett Center. Their hope was that in doing so, it could serve as a blueprint for others to create very similar affiliates of MMHPI or anyone else in other regions of Texas, in other states, even around the world. You know, we're not going to move forward without collaboration. And that's a big part of what led us to where we are in terms of our philanthropy today. As my mom mentioned, we weren't making much progress. So it's all about collaborating with the people who know how to get you to that next step.
It's such an interesting point because there's collaboration on the funder side, but also on the nonprofit side. And one of the things I've tried to, that we've learned from our donors, folks like you, is that nonprofits and some of the folks on this call, in my opinion at least, and from what we've seen, should be open to you know, being part of a solution, not the entire solution for things you want to fund. And so you're it sounds like you're suggesting collaboration on that side as well is important to you.
Absolutely. You know, my mom used to always say when we were growing up that her father used to tell her you can't feed every single squirrel and actually see an impact. There are a lot of squirrels out there. But if you get the squirrels together, find out what's going to feed them forever, it would be great. You could just make that one gift. But yeah, it's a big part of why we weren't making progress. You know, you spread yourself too thin and have too many people trying to accomplish the same thing, but not having all of the support that they need, whether that's financial or anything else behind them. It's no surprise that we're not hitting the impact that we want to see right away. But we're in a perfect environment now, fortunately and unfortunately, given where things are in the world, that people are ready to work together if it means that we're going to get to our solution faster and for everyone.
And the social sector takes on the hardest problems, right? I tell our for-profit board members sometimes, you all handle the easy stuff. We're trying to do mental health and homelessness and food insecurity and
just human rights. We're just establishing, no problem.
And don't you wish, to that point, don't you wish, and I keep hearing over and over, nonprofit, not for profit. That's, you know, it's just that in itself is demeaning. Like, I can't stand the word stigma, so I don't ever use that word. So we got to come up with another term. It's not they aren't nonprofit agencies. They're philanthropic agencies.
Yeah, they're world changers.
Yeah, they're game changers. Yeah,
works for me. Maureen, you touched on this a little bit before, but I wonder if we could take a few minutes to go a little deeper on what advice you have for nonprofits on the role of boards. And in particular, you talked about the need for inclusivity and multiple voices, but I wonder, you know, any best practices beyond that you have to share, but specifically, I'm curious about the area of kind of risk-taking, if you will. I know when you were the board chair of the Community Foundation, you pushed us to do some things, and also you might talk a little bit about, you created an environment where the board could have conversation and back us up on risk-taking. And I think that's critically important, that the staff knows that the board will support that, because in order to address issues like this, sometimes you're going to fail. So I wonder if you might talk a little bit about that.
That's interesting. And I remember those days so well. It was 18 months before we were making a difference there. First of all, when we met, I made sure that people had pancakes and bacon and sausage, and they showed up. So that was great. Staff and the board itself. So I think if I can tell you the story of what I think is expected of me when I join a board. First, I look at leadership. So you bet I do my due diligence on you. I look at all the other board members that are there. I want to see if they are working, because I'm a working board member. So that might not be for everyone, but I like to do that. And I like to sit in on every single committee meeting so that I know the financials. I've read the audit. I know the communications plan, the PR plan, the science, whatever behind all of it. So I'm unusual in that sense, but I would encourage onboarding with all your non-for-profits that are listening to this. Onboarding, give them the whole spiel. Let them talk to everybody. And don't think that onboarding takes place in one meeting. It could take 6 months. Encourage your board members to attend as many committee meetings as they can, or what maybe interests them. It might be 3 committees, and give them some time to choose where they should serve. Don't appoint them. I always get appointed to fundraising. Maybe I want to be on audit, you know, I don't know.
I don't think so.
I want to know if all the voices are there at the table that need to be there to guide management to success, because I want management to be successful, or I wouldn't have joined this board. You don't need me if you're already gliding past 100%. But I want to sit down with you, and I want to make sure that you guys are at the table with us. And you always seat the staff in the corner, which I know that's a tradition, but I want them right at the table with me. I have my grandchildren sitting at the table with me, and if you can get through blueberry pancakes on your furniture, you can get through anything. So I invite you to have them at the table. As I said, is it a working board? Are they focused on the mission, and have they engaged in a working committee? And if they haven't, bad on you. You need to check in and say, have we done something? Have we not done something? Are we adding value to you being a board member? Are you adding value to us? Figure that out before that happens. So I call fundraising an art. And I think on the part of the board, it really is my belief that time and relationships are just as valuable as money. I can open doors, you can close. It's the same thing in investments and making deals, so to speak. So several board members can bring you lots and lots of relationships, but they'll be very uncomfortable if you say you got to be a fundraiser. So what you do say is, we are a philanthropic board. What does that mean? That means we need your help. We need your friends. One, we need you to bank with us. We need your friends to bank with us. And we need your friends' friends to bank with us. That's the way I look at it. I think the board and the staff have very distinct and different roles. And I think it's important for board members to understand there's a fine line that you don't cross over. I don't manage you as a board chair. I work together with you, but it's your ball of wax. End of the day, it's your success, or God forbid, it's your failure. I'd never let that happen. I think when it comes to fundraising, though, it's a team. It's going to take management. It's going to take the board. It's going to take some people that aren't on the board or committee members. It's going to take some friends that we have from AFP that can help us get a meeting or learn some information about someone. I myself like to be involved in the whole thing, the creation, the strategy, and the execution. And I might be stronger in one area or the next, but I am going to depend on the professionals in this business to help me think this through and get comfortable. End of the day, if I understand it completely, I think I'll have more success and feel more at ease that I'm putting my time investment to the right place. As I said, some board members are comfortable making presentations and others are not, and that's just fine. Find out who the cheerleaders are. There's always cheerleaders, and there's always basketball players. Those are the strategists. So watch the strategists and let the cheerleaders sell the stuff. Did that answer your question? I kind of feel like it didn't.
Yeah, no, absolutely it did. And there are a couple points you made I thought were particularly interesting. One, when you said towards the end, you like to be in on the creation, the strategy, and the execution. I think a shortcoming for a lot of, what did you call us, philanthropic organizations?
Yes, I did.
We go straight to strategy and we don't slow down to look at creation and vision.
Right.
Or check in occasionally to say, is that still relevant or do we need any adjustments? So I think that's really important. I also think your comments, I'm not surprised that I'm making notes while I'm also asking you questions, because I knew you guys would share great stuff. Right now, I think many of us are facing a similar challenge. Everybody is trying to increase the voices in the boardroom and build diversity. And that means reaching out beyond the normal networks our board members have, which means we have to be able to recruit and to tell our story really well. And I think the things you're talking about in terms of introducing people and really having them understand what we're trying to achieve and having them meet other board members and get a sense of the board culture and because some boards are not very hands-on and ours is.
Right. Yeah.
And I'm sure that's true for others on the call. So I think that's critical. Last little question for you. I'm curious to that end, what you all think of board mentoring, and if you think that's a good process to assign existing board members to new ones, or do you feel like that's kind of overblown? Because I hear from our board members both sides of that. I'm curious.
Yeah, I myself love that. I've made a suggestion all the time that I would be happy to be the pal for the new board member, particularly if I nominated that board member, because it can be daunting. looking at all the meetings and what's expected and reading the bylaws and understanding the finances. So I'm a big fan for pals, mentors, big brothers, big sisters. Yes, I am. I'm on, Anderson's board is huge. And I don't know how anyone could navigate it. It's 200, 300 people. I don't know how they'd navigate it on their own. It can be very time consuming for staff. But I think with staff and another board member, it can be hugely successful and a great deal of fun, That's how you get to know someone.
Yep,
I think everyone would be lucky to have my mom as a mentor. So I think it's probably easier for her to answer that it's a great thing on the receiving end, as I've been of some board mentors at other places. It really depends on whether you have board members who are super engaged, like my mom, and who even know what it means to be a mentor. I've had people assigned to me who don't even know what to say or what they're supposed to be doing or what they're supposed to be sharing. And I think there's a lot of emphasis put on, very specific. So if I'm sitting on a finance committee, people feel like they need to be going over balance sheets with me. And really, board mentorship is about something much bigger than the specific committee that you're on. Let's not get stuck in the minutia. So I think there's probably some orientation that needs to occur with existing board members to make sure that you're providing something that's actually useful. I mean, there's no reason to just tag people as board mentors if it's not going to ultimately bring value back to the group itself. So
sorry, go ahead.
No, go for it.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think that's a terrific way for us to wrap up this part of the conversation. I think that's a really tangible advice point that we haven't done, but we will now, which is to bring some orientation around the mentoring component as well. Yeah. So I thank you both. I think you're terrific trailblazers in your own rights. And I'm going to turn it over to Kevin, who is going to take us through some of the questions from our audience.
Terrific. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you, Steve, and Kelly, Maureen, thank you so much again for being here. For the participants, if you have any questions, please drop those in the Q&A box. We've got about 10 minutes left, and so we would definitely want to turn it over to you. I do know the attendees here, many of them, they are, as you can imagine, pretty shy and reserved and not likely to speak out, but I'll give them some time because I've got two burning thoughts that you talked about. One, given this week in particular, your message of kindness, I think resonates probably with everybody in the fact that we're in this all together. So I really appreciate the fact that you lifted that up. I think it's a great point and something that we need to always remind ourselves of. You talked quite a bit about this inclusivity and diversity. And I know at AFP, we talk a lot about that and how do we diversify our boards or bring a different voice to the table. And as you think about it from a board perspective and a volunteer and donor perspective, but then you also think about it from an organizational or staff perspective, which comes first? Do you have to diversify your organization, your staff, your fundraising team? Or do you need to diversify your board, volunteers, and donors? Or is it something in the middle? Kind of where do you see us? What's the secret?
Here's what I see. So it's actually interesting because I was asked that question yesterday, and I would tell you each office, and AFP, start with AFP. Take a look at your own house. Are you diverse? Is there a feeling of equity? How are you? How is it that you're diverse? I will look, at that. I would have a discussion with you, the incoming global person, and ask you, so what do all these organizations look like? You can't expect to have a diverse board unless you have a diverse business, in my opinion. And what is AFP's stance? Do you have a diversity, equity, and inclusion committee studying this? Are they looking at the science of all of this? And it's in some of these larger not-for-profits, do they have committees dedicated to this and officers? I know at the Meadows Mental Health Policy Institute, specifically at the Hackett Center, we do have someone taking a look at that. And it's a very interesting, it's a perfect time to do this. It's ridiculous it's taken this long in our world, but I think I would look to the organization who's asking me for anything, time, talent, anything. I'm keen to it now. Have we always been keen to it? I have been most of my life because of the way I was raised and how my parents didn't care about the color of someone's skin or where they lived. If they were freezing cold, they gave them a coat. So I think I think you should take a look at the house first.
Yeah, I would just add that, diversity is only worthwhile if it's meaningful.
Yeah.
There's a very easy way to stack your board or your staff with things that look and sound diverse, but if it's not meaningful, if it's not authentic, then it's not really worthwhile. So I would say yes, to my mom's point, know the statistics, be doing meaningful work internally, but for me, it matters more that it's authentic, not necessarily where it's located, but I do think that it needs to be on both sides of the spectrum. I can't imagine a meaningfully and authentically diverse group of people at an organization that has not the same sort of thing on their board. That would just make no sense to me. I'm not sure how they'd get anything done. I don't know how people would actually want to be on that board. So as long as it's authentic and meaningful, then I don't have any preference as to what comes first.
So Kelly, a question for you. So out of all the things you could have done professionally, and of course you love your family and you get tons of opportunity to be with your family regardless of professionally, why did you take this role and this is a career path for you?
Okay, so to be perfectly honest, I was telling someone who's applying to Georgetown the other day that my life is a happy series of accidents. I actually never knew that I wanted to be a lawyer until I was already out of college. I thought I was getting an MBA. I was going to go to the same school my father went to. I was just going to essentially be him in female form. But then I grew up and realized I can be my own being. And I started really paying attention to the business world around me. I knew early on that I was going to have a role in my family that was going to be taking on the multi-generational representation of G2, as we call it. And that's because many, many years ago, my parents sat each of us down separately in a room with nobody else there and said, if anything were to ever happen to us, who would you want to have represent you, as an executor or a trustee or what have you? And my siblings all voted me for various reasons, and not because they think I'm the coolest or the best. Believe you me.
Some were frightened.
Some were like, because I would have no interest, so let's just throw it all at Kelly. Some were like, oh, maybe, I don't know, I think she studied finance, throw it at her. She's a nerd. Maybe she'll like it more than we will. So I knew that I had a role. And when I was in law, I found that practicing corporate securities law was not as fulfilling for me as I wanted it to be. I wanted to have more of an impact on people rather than corporations. And I saw an opportunity in also helping manage our family office to help my parents put even more strategy around their philanthropy. Because I am, quote, Attila, I knew that I could, push things through faster than perhaps they felt they were allowed to. A lot of people give and hope that their legacy will be something grand once they're gone. For me, there's no reason for that. Live your legacy today. Why don't you be the ones who tell the world what your legacy is by living through your giving right now? So I was just inspired to do more for my parents and not wait, because I guess I'm impatient. That's really what led me to where I am. I love helping people to enjoy what they've worked so hard to build.
Yeah.
It's really important to me. Don't just leave it for future generations to enjoy it. You worked hard for it. And, my parents came from nothing. I want them to enjoy it.
That's great.
Mm-hmm.
So Maureen, a final question for you. So we all now, thanks to the nightly news, know where every single state is located. We probably now have in our minds what color it is, or what color it might be, or what shades of a color it is. And I know you've traveled around the US a lot and you've studied philanthropy in the US and globally. What is it about Houston that makes Houston different and makes Houston such a philanthropic city?
It's the people. It literally is the people. Now, I grew up in the Midwest and those were giving people. I have 8 siblings, none of whom are involved in philanthropy to the level that I am. In Houston, you're embraced. You're embraced whether or not you're philanthropic. We moved here in and out of this state 4 different times, and we moved here 1980 and had a baby a year old. We were welcomed with open arms into a community that just blew my mind, with people that drove pickups and had hard hats when we were coming from Boston. So and we were welcomed in really, really well. I just think it's the town. And Houston, I will tell you, is different than Dallas. To me, it's very welcoming, compassionate. People care about one another. You wouldn't know that watching some of the news. You certainly wouldn't know that with George Floyd and things like that go on. But you know what? Houston can lift up. And that's what I really like about Houston. It's believable. We can lift people up, and gosh knows, I mean, the AFP group is just a blast. I just love all you guys, all y'all, as they say in Texas.
Exactly. Well, our time is coming to a close, and I just want to say on behalf of AFP to Steve, thank you so much for guiding the conversation. Kelly and Maureen, I know you probably have 100 other things you'd rather be doing on a Friday morning that has such beautiful Houston winter weather. But of course, it would go without saying that anytime we have a chance to hear from the Hackett, it's going to be a good day in Houston. So thank you so much. I'm particularly proud of the fact that Maureen is going to provide the keynote address as a part of the National Philanthropy Day Global Virtual Celebration, which is on November the 12th. For those of us in Houston, that's at 11 a.m. I encourage all of you to join. It is free to participate, so I encourage you to register. My assumption is it'll be a slightly different take on your view of philanthropy, so I encourage you all to participate. But to close out this day of reflection and celebration of National Philanthropy Day here in Houston, I thought I wanted to underscore how essential building relationships, and I mean meaningful relationships, is to sharing the mission of our organizations with the countless philanthropic partners across our community. And especially in these uncertain times, being surrounded by a community of fundraising experts who continue to build and grow our philanthropic networks is reassuring. I want to thank all of you for driving philanthropy, continuing to come together to learn from each other and to share with each other and to lift each other up. We will make it through this uncertainty, and we will continue to move our missions forward as we continue to make remarkable advancements for our organizations through philanthropy. I wish you all of the best in the coming weeks and months until we are all back together in person. Thank you again, Kelly, Maureen, Steve, and I hope you all have a wonderful weekend.
Thanks so
you.
much.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much.